across the board. We destroyed Iraq's military in 1991. Their economy was in ruins. Iraq represented a threat to no one outside the people of Iraq, and I will give you this. It was a horrific dictatorship that was oppressing its people in the most brutal fashion, but that's not why I go to war, ladies and gentlemen. I go to war when someone threatens my country, and we had terminated that threat in 1991. But the president, in selling this war, said the following, that Saddam Hussein, this is a speech he made in October 1990, Saddam Hussein is the Middle East equivalent of Adolf Hitler, who requires Nuremberg-like retribution for his crime of invading Kuwait. We went to war because the international community, in the form of the Security Council of the United Nations, said Iraq must be expelled from Kuwait, but made no mention of regime change. But when you link Saddam with Hitler, you have trapped yourself with your own rhetoric. Saddam's survival after the initial Gulf War created a political problem for the president. Regime change was not about national security. It was about solving a political embarrassment of the President of the United States, an embarrassment that was passed on from one president to the next to the next. This has nothing to do with the legitimate security interests of the United States.
No, but what was the embarrassment?
Saddam Hussein's continued survival.
Yes.
When you call a man Hitler, you cannot allow Hitler to continue to rule in Iraq, and that was the problem. The president called him Hitler
while punishing his people.
So why
punishing his people with sanctions.
Pardon?
While punishing his people with sanctions, and not only allowing him to remain in power, but being complicit with his remaining in power.
Yeah, but
American helicopter gunships were grounded so that Iraq's could be put back in the air, and they watched while they were used on the Shia and on the Kurds. Schwarzkopf gave permission for that genocidal operation. We're complicit. We can't walk away from this. Iraq is a responsibility, and I'm afraid, though I'm glad to see you nod, Mr. Ritter, but that means you can't be exhaustive when you say, no, who's cackling? Oh, it's that comedian fellow. He was okay, I thought. He cackles for a living. He's doing it again. You're supposed to be crying at this point. If you have, no, because ladies and gentlemen, if you have tears, prepare to shed them now. General Schwarzkopf, in our name, gave Saddam Hussein operational permission to commit genocide. That means we're stuck with a responsibility. That means that we are responsible for more than just our own safety. I'm sorry to say, for Mr. Ritter to argue that only in case of an attack on the United States are we responsible is fair and defensible, but it's not really enough to say it. We owe a debt to the people of Iraq. We've saddled ourselves with them, their society and their state, as our responsibility for a long time now, and we're beginning only now to begin to pay off some of that debt by helping them into a post-Saddam era, by giving them a lot of aid, by lifting the sanctions at last, and by assisting the evolution of a federal democracy with all the hazards and disappointments that are involved. That's the very least we could have done. But the alternative was complicity with violation of the Genocide Convention, with a regime that attacked and occupied neighboring states, and which harbored international terrorists, and as you must have noticed from Scott Ritter's very imposing narrative of his own experience, couldn't be trusted an inch when it came to any conversation about WMD.
Well, again, here's my problem. I have no problem with the notion of your four definitions of how nations lose sovereignty. The problem is, with all due respect, you don't get to make that call. You can have your opinion, but when we talk about holding a nation to account, there must be due process. And to jump to the conclusion that Iraq has committed genocide without due process making that finding, to jump to the conclusion that Iraq continues to possess weapons of mass destruction without due process making that finding, to jump to any conclusion that you put forward without due process shows a total disrespect to the rule of law. And if you're going to embrace democracy, you must embrace the rule of law.
I'm very happy to take the opportunity of not just seconding you in that. I'd rather try and outdo you in saying that. I mean, I think you're more right than you know. I'm a member and a supporter of a group called Indict, which was founded by a very important leader of the parliamentary left in the British Labour Party, ruling party. Anne Clewett is her name, heroic woman, who we for years before the war were pressing the British Attorney General to indict Saddam Hussein and to bring in a bill that would state the reasons why he should be arrested and put on trial. These would begin probably with Operation Anfal, the attempt to exterminate the Kurdish people, but Britain and other countries had standing, a jurisdiction in it as well because of the holding of hostages in Kuwait as insurance, one of the most illegal things a state can do. Take the civilians of other nations and use them as human shields, which had happened to many of our citizens and many of yours. The indictment could have gone on forever. We could have wheeled from Kanan Makia's office at Brandeis, we could have wheeled into court the steel filing cabinets that contain the genocide indictment at any time, in any country.
But we didn't.
And it wasn't done. It wasn't done. And it's an international disgrace, and it's a shame on both the governments of Britain and the United States. In case anyone has another opinion or impression, I don't stand here as the representative of the United States government. In fact, I sometimes wonder if they could make a decent case for regime change, I could have some more time off. But because they're so bad at it, doesn't mean that the case should not be made. So, if you want to know how fucked up your republic is, that's how fucked up it is.
All right. Getting back to what the point you made that it was never about disarmament, it's about regime change, and you cite as the reason the declaration by President George H.W. Bush that he's Hitler. And you seem to make you put a lot of importance in that. Well, he said he's Hitler. After he said that, he'll lose face if he doesn't knock him off. But why would President Clinton honor any particular obligation to save the face of the president who preceded him, and therefore launch another 8-year campaign for regime change? Because George H.W. Bush said 8 years ago that, well, you know, this guy is Hitler, but so is it really credible to say President Clinton felt he had to salvage the honor and integrity of his predecessor, who made the remark that this man is akin to Hitler?
Well, again, the short answer to that is domestic American politics. The long answer is that, look, George Herbert Walker Bush had a political problem with the continued survival of Saddam Hussein, one that the CIA remarked on in March 1991 with an estimate that said Saddam Hussein has but 6 months to live if we can continue to contain the man with economic sanctions. This will destabilize him, and this will promote the coup from within. It's wrong to say regime change early on, because the first Bush administration had no intention whatsoever of changing the regime. They wanted Baathists in control. They wanted a Sunni-dominated dictatorship in control because they recognized that there was no viable option to replace Saddam Hussein, that if you remove Saddam Hussein and the Baathist Party, Iraq will devolve into chaos and anarchy because regardless of the despicable nature of the regime, it represented the glue that held that country together. They didn't want regime change. They wanted name change. They simply wanted Saddam removed and replaced with somebody who looked like Saddam, talked like Saddam, behaved like Saddam, who wasn't named Saddam. This is why they put forward Resolution 687, which created the conditions to contain Iraq through the maintenance of economic sanctions. Sadly for the Bush administration, Saddam Hussein survived longer than 6 months, creating a problem for the president. What to do? They now lacked a policy to deal with Saddam Hussein. Well, they came up with a new policy in October of 1992 called regime change, authorized, but again, it's name change. It authorized the CIA. It was a lethal finding published by the president, secret document, covert policy. It authorized the CIA to use whatever means necessary, up to and including lethal force, to remove Saddam Hussein from power. October 1992, but they never had a chance to implement this because in November 1992, Bill Clinton wins the election. Now, the Clinton administration comes in, and from November 92 to January 93, puts out feelers to the Iraqi government saying that we believe we can find the conditions under which economic sanctions can be lifted. We need to work with the Iraqis. The Iraqis were gloating about this. I write this in my book about a meeting with, at that time, Amr Rashid, who wasn't quite the oil minister, but on his way to being an oil minister, saying all the problems are going to be resolved really soon. The Clinton administration is going to end this nightmare. The Bush administration was aware of the fact that Bill Clinton said, I'm a Southern Baptist who believes in deathbed conversions, and I think we can get Saddam Hussein to change his way. That's why, on the same day that Bill Clinton took his oath of office, the United States was bombing Iraq. Now, how can you, as the new commander-in-chief, talk about lifting sanctions against a nation that you're actively engaged in military operations again? Well, he tried. And by the spring of 1993, he was getting ready to move forward, and then something else occurs. It's called the assassination attempt against George Herbert Walker Bush. He was supposed to visit Kuwait. There's now this attempt on his life, or this alleged attempt, because it's funny, when the FBI investigated, a couple things